Hi, I'm Irene Tansman, author of A.B. and Arlene's Autism War. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, I'd like to talk to you about recent advances in the field of applied behavior analysis. And I have a special guest with me today, Dr. Erik Jacobson. Dr. Jacobson is the chief psychologist at Upstate Cerebral Palsy in upstate New York. Erik is known known in the developmental disabilities community as an early adapter to the most recent advances in the field of applied behavior analysis. He is a proponent of humane, evidence-based, and language-based ABA instruction. While many families struggle to obtain quality language-based instruction for our loved ones with severe developmental disabilities, those attending UCP in upstate New York receive this service as a given. Welcome, Erik, and thanks for being here.
Irene, it's great to be here. Really a pleasure to be able to talk about the work that we've been doing at Upstate Cerebral Palsy, particularly related to our applied behavior analysis model.
Could you tell us a little bit about Upstate Cerebral Palsy and tell us about the population you serve, how you're funded, the program size? You're not all cerebral palsy there.
We are not all cerebral palsy. I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges at time for recruitment, particularly for behavior analysts that are used to working in the field of autism and maybe intellectual disabilities, is that's the belief is that it's all cerebral palsy and you need a specialization in cerebral palsy. While we do have individuals in our program that have cerebral palsy, it's a minor group relative to individuals with intellectual disabilities with and without autism. That's generally our population, from mild to more severe intellectual disabilities with and without autism. It's kind of shifting where you look at our adult programs. You see individuals more diagnosed with intellectual disability. In our school age program, you see that intellectual disability, but also an autism spectrum disorder. And that's kind of shifted over time. I've been here for about 15 years now. And it's really, for me, it's just been an incredible journey with the agency to getting to the point that where we are right now in the services that we provide. We'll talk a little bit more about that, I think, as we go along and how we got to this point. But it's a neat agency. We're in central New York, right between Albany and Syracuse. We cover 4 counties in this area as far as the services that we provide. And we are kind of a one-stop shop, all the way from early intervention to adult services, where we provide those services. So we have around 200 individuals or children that are in early intervention services, about 200 that are in our preschool program that have been classified as a preschooler with a disability. We also have around 150 other students that come as part of our inclusion program. We have 72 school-age students from 5 to 21 that live with us residentially. And then we also have around 130 other students that come to our Tradewinds education program. So that's school age program. And then we have around 250 adults that live with us residentially. So during this past 2 years of this COVID times, is that we are essential workers, 24/7 programs, particularly in our school age program and our adult program that is our residential programs. As far as funding goes, we're funded both through Medicaid in our residential programs, as well as through state ed in our school programs, through the counties, and through districts, local districts related to those funding.
So you're known in the developmental disabilities community as an early adapter to the most modern evidence-based ABA practices. Tell us what attracted you to these ideas.
Love it. Well, and I like that idea of calling myself an early adapter. Some of it, I feel like we kind of wound up with these practices through a kind of coincidence in some ways. For me, where it started out was, I would say prior to 2017, I would call ourselves a kind of a generic ABA program. A lot of the regulations require, particularly when you look at severe problem behavior, require you to follow FBAs and BIPs that generally fall within an ABA framework. We had a special education program that was a combination of practices and curriculum that you would expect to see in this with this population. We used the unique curriculum at that time that was really targeted, probably a higher functioning group that we have in our programs. On our residential end, I think we had a very caring practices that were going on in that program, but we didn't necessarily have some of the evidence-based work that we wanted to see. For me, in this work, I think where I was frustrated with not getting to some of the outcomes that we wanted to get to, and knowing that there were evidence-based interventions and strategies that we could be incorporating differently into our program. And that was around 2015, 2016. I was there and I was just kind of feeling frustrated with those outcomes, and feeling, particularly when you talk about severe problem behavior, which is a lot of what my clinical department worked on, was it was like a little bit of a whack-a-mole where you were just kind of putting out fires, and we were firefighters. And a lot of our clinicians that were master's level clinicians would spend their days just managing crises, or they needed to be really good in our safety intervention prevention procedures. And so it was always like a search of like, how can we do this differently? So what ended up happening, I was with my wife down at a conference in New Orleans. It was the Association of Professional Behavior Analysts Conference, and wound up going to a presentation by a few of Dr. Greg Hanley's students that he was working with at that time from Western New England, and was just really wowed by what they were doing. They had kind of a brief functional analysis that they were conducting, and they had a system of treatment that went along with it. And I said, this is exactly what I need, something that is doable with my clinicians. I didn't have any BCBAs at the time, but I said, I really like this idea. For those that know Dr. Hanley, he's a tremendous speaker, very compassionate behavior analyst. Really a leader in the movement towards what he calls today's ABA, which is a much more compassionate ABA that still incorporates the evidence-based practices that you want to see. And so I left there saying, I got to figure out how to get this guy into our program. So I eventually, through a number of different channels, we were able to bring him here for a presentation to us, a training that he provided on his practical functional assessment. It used to be called the ISCA back then, practical functional assessment and skills-based treatment. And that was in 2017 in September. And from there, it's been a journey. Dr. Hanley, through that practice, and once we got to those skills, part of the skills at the beginning is really where you're working on functional communication. And what that really identified is for us is like, we didn't have some of the modalities in place that we needed to have in place, like picture exchange communication system, or the use of AAC devices, or other ways that students could be able to get what they want without engaging in challenging behaviors. So that started working on that piece for us, is like, okay, we got to do something different with this piece. And then the next piece is working on toleration. And he showed us a way to build up toleration skills. But what was neat from there is that you start to work on these different branches where you're working on skills that are going to be really essential for those students to improve the quality of their life. A lot of this work at that time was done in our school age program. And we realized we didn't know what to do. Our curriculum wasn't really informing us with life-changing skills that we should be working on. So that led us to trying to figure out what would work best for us. And that's how we landed with the Essential for Living and the work that we've been doing since 2020 with Dr. Pat McGreevy and Troy Fry. We brought them in for some training on this piece, and we said, okay, this is another component that we need. And so we started building up that piece. This was all in our school age program that we were working on. But at the same time, we were starting to build this model. We were realizing that we needed more behavior analysts in our program to help us deliver on this model. So we did a major changing of our staffing model, and we're able to start hiring behavior analysts, where for Central New York, we'll have the largest program of behavior analysts over the next probably 5 years. We've been able to send staff back to school to get their certification or to get their master's degree in ABA and also their certification. And we've been able to hire out of state, as well as there's been a number of local analysts. We don't have a lot in central New York, but we're able to bring them on board as well. All right, I just talked a lot there.
Some of our viewers might not be familiar with the Essential for Living curriculum and the Essential 8. And I'm going to place a link in the YouTube description below so that our viewers can familiarize themselves with the Essential 8 and with the Essential for Living curriculum and assessment. So tell us the results. We want to know the results. How are your learners progressing?
Absolutely. Well, I will tell you this, Irene, this is our first year, the 2021-2022 school year, where all of our IEPs are fully informed by the EFL. And so this upcoming year, we'll have actual real data that I'll be able to provide to say, are they making progress on the goals that we want to be making progress with? This is a key.
Are you going to publish? Because that would be very helpful for all of us.
So part of what we've been doing with Dr. Hanley and some of the other FDF consultants that we've been working on some major, a new model where we incorporate what's called universal protocols into our model, how our staff are interacting with the individuals that we support in our program. And also in there is his PFA, SPT, and EFL. So it's kind of all together. And we have some larger organizational data that we're collecting on that to say, are we better off using this model than we've been in the past? Now, one of the wrinkles in there is this little thing called COVID that has made us pivot every day around, okay, how do you do this? You got students that are now remote, now they're back home. You have staff that were having to quarantine as well. So it's been a bumpy ride, a lot of turbulence that we've had for the last couple of years. But yeah, our intent is to absolutely publish. That's where we see our future in as an agency, is to be a major research powerhouse related to individuals with moderate to severe disabilities.
Because parents have been having problems getting getting goals and objectives based on the Essential 8 skills. You shouldn't have to fight for this. This should be handed to you. But
you shouldn't, right? But I think part of the problem that exists is that you have a lot of special education programs, university-based programs, that they're not informed around this population. We are the 1% on that.
When you say this population, you're talking about moderate to severe disability.
Absolutely. You know what? And I think oftentimes they're forgotten, and that this is a population that we need more innovative practices that are put into our special education programs so that our teachers come out fully informed related to this work. Because I think that's what's going to drive change for our residential programs and for our adult programs, is a lot of it's going to come out from our education programs, and that there's going to be a lag before you're going to be able to get to some of the adult programs. But if we're not doing it with our very richly staffed programs that you get in schools versus when they become adults and you have that cliff and yet don't have as many staff as you want related to instruction, related to support, that it's going to be a challenge to get it there. So that's my goal, and that's what I see as a difference. The other neat thing that we've been doing with FTF Behavior Consultants is working what's called preschool life skills. It starts to work on these essential skills during the preschool years. So you're trying to avoid more restrictive settings down the road and a more positive outcomes when they get to district programs. So we call this essential skills teaching model, is that we're going to do it over the lifespan. But I think we're going to get our best results in the schools and build to fluency, particularly when you look at things related to communication, some of these essential skills that you want to work on, communication being key, is that by the time they get to the adult program, you want them to be as fluent as possible with their communication modality.
I agree with you totally. My own son is an adult. There was when he was growing up, there was no EFL, there was no Essential 8. Those were not identified. A lot of the goals and objectives they worked on, I thought were ridiculous.
Right, absolutely.
when you're talking about, being able to ask for your preferences. One of my son's preferences is to be able to go out for a walk. Well, it's very difficult unless you have a staff person there to take him on a walk.
Yeah.
So when he's home, he gets a lot of reinforcement on whatever it is he asked for. Whatever it is he asked for, he gets.
That's great.
But they're not doing that in the program. And in some ways they can't do it. In other ways, they won't do it. There are some simple things that he's asked for, but the programs are really provider based. Whatever it is, whatever they're doing, that's what you have to do. It's not based on the choices of the individual.
Of the individual, yeah.
And you have to have that in order to really get that communication going. You have to let them make their own choices.
Spot on. That's part of our universal protocols, is like respecting choice and listening to their voice. Right. And that's how you build trust. And you improve the quality of life. And so that's really what we try to hone on as much as possible. Institutions, I think at times they get used to doing things a certain way, whether it's a residential program or a school program, and they can't think outside the box for the needs of our individuals. And that's, during this COVID time has really taught us to think differently around how can you do it? Because there are programs and there are staff that are able to do it. And then some that really struggle and they see a lot of obstacles, and so that we try to take down as many of those obstacles as we can so that we can get to outcomes in quality of life.
So you mentioned that you want to catch this as early as possible, work on it as early as possible when you have the funding. What about the cost? Is this more expensive to do than what you were doing before?
Absolutely. With any quality improvement, there's always startup costs that are associated with it because you have to do training. There's costs related to ensuring that you are following through with expectations of that training. The instruction is the right instruction. So for us, there really hasn't been any different costs. It just required us to do things differently. Long term, there would be no difference from what we were previously doing. Now, for me, the other thing that in order to really benefit our programs as much as possible, it may require some specialists to be within your program to ensure quality implementation. Again, that's a little easier in our school programs than it is in our adult programs or our residential programs, given that the funding streams are a little different in both of those programs or how you utilize staff.
Now, across the country, there is a crisis in direct support professionals.
Yes.
How has this doing things differently, has this helped or hurt that? Is it harder to find people? Is it easier to find people? How has that affected UCP?
I tell you, I mean, it is certainly unreal what we've experienced during the past a couple years, but I would say particularly during the past probably 6 months, is that our entry-level staff, that you're not seeing nearly as many applying than you did in the past. But it also, for us, it's made us think differently. Okay, how do you recruit around this so that you can bring people into your program? How do you retain them? And that goes back to our culture shift that we're going through, called Happy, Relaxed, Engaged. Is how can we both have individuals that we support, the people that we support, be happy, relaxed, and engaged, and that's our universal protocols. But also, how can our staff feel that way, and how do you manage them so that you can help with the morale? I mean, I'm just blown away. I actually on New Year's Day last week, I worked shift. It was a vacation day, and I'm not trying to be the hot shot or anything with it, but I went and worked in the program because they were down and they were desperate. And I said, okay, I'll go worked a 9-hour shift. And I was quite impressed, even with staff, some of the management staff just saying how difficult things were, was the attitude of staff that are in program, knowing that they have huge hearts and they have the best intentions for the individuals that are there. So it was a great day for me to be able to see that during these desperate times, that they're still working through it, but it has not been easy by any point with getting through this this pandemic, you know, and but you do see some shifts. I know our governor is looking at doing things differently related to money that's going to be focused for particularly for students with disabilities. And so excited to see that. You know, it's a population that you would like to see that money go across both all the way from EI all the way up through adult services. Is that you know, we're in need of more financial support in order to recruit and retain, you know, your best employees.
I would think that that staff are happier teaching language skills, teaching waiting, than performing restraints.
Absolutely.
You know, and that's, you know, that's the big shift. The shift is from treating behaviors with a variety of restraints and punishments to actually teaching the adaptive skills that they need in order not to have that behavior. But it's very hard to convince people that this is the way to go.
It is, you know, and for me, what I do is we continue to collect champions that really like the shift that we're going through. We call this making shift happen, is that we're shifting from the old ways to the new ways, shifting from a very compassionate caretaking model to an instructional model. And that those are the people that drive change. You know, you look at culture change is you need your champions out there, not the administrator, not Dr. J telling you this is great, but the person that's on the floor doing this every day to say my work life is different as a result of doing this work. But Irene, you said earlier, like you had goals that just didn't make sense. We had that spread throughout our program of like, why are we working on this? And not only why are we working on it, but we've been working on it for years and it's not working.
Absolutely.
And this goal is not going to improve anything for this individual. So that's a lot of what we've been going through, is like rethinking, why did we have this goal in place and what is really going to change the quality outcome of their life. And that's where the Essential 8 really makes you start to think about, okay, what improves quality? But it all starts with communication. And that's huge.
Do you know of any other programs that have embraced the Essential 8?
Yeah, I mean, there's
certainly in Italy, I know.
Yeah, you know, I know the one program that we work particularly close with is Victory Academy out in Washington. And yeah, so they've been terrific for us because they were ahead of the work. They've done a lot of work with Pat and Troy related to presentations and showing what they've been doing for their students out there. They're neat because, you know, what I like about them is that part of doing the Essential 8 well and doing event-based teaching that's part of the Essential for Living is being able to get critical thinking from your staff that are working every day with your students or the adults that are in their program. That requires a lot of work because they need to think about what is the essential skill that they need to be working on and how can I work on this during lunch. So maybe it's someone that, you know, needs to work on waiting but they have someone else you're doing, you know, you have multiple people in that room and the other individual needs to work on more daily living skills. So they need to work on more prep stuff related to that lunch activity. So it requires so much critical thinking and on the floor thinking of like, okay, how can I be thinking about this essential skill? And I'm going to work on it all day long. And it's going to go across different activities that are there. So it's a journey, you know, and we continue to go down this journey is to say, we can do better. We can think more critically, even during this really stressful, tough time.
Erik, I want to thank you so much for being on my channel. It's been a very interesting conversation, and I wish you, I wish you luck. And to everyone out there, thank you for watching. I hope you I found this video helpful, and I'll see you on the next one.